Put that down. You're scaring the real customers." The emerald dress slipped from Amara's hand before she could react. A hush fell across the boutique. Jazz music dulled. Perfume bottles froze mid-spray, and heels halted mid-click. Then came a slap. Not to her face, but her dignity. Victoria's manicured hand swung fast, knocking the hanger clean out of Amara's reach. Fabric crumpled onto the marble floor like something filthy. Laughter trickled in from the register. Phones paused mid-scroll. No one spoke. No one helped. Amara stood still, mocha-toned, hoodie plain, eyes calm. Not defiant, not begging, just silent. "If you want to play dress up," Victoria sneered, her red lips curled smug. "There's a thrift store down the block." The security guard shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Amara didn't flinch. She bent slowly, picked up a dress, and hung it back in place like it belonged. Her fingers grazed the silk. Her silence cut deeper than any shout could. Victoria scoffed again. "You're wasting everyone's time." But what she didn't know, what no one in that boutique knew, was that the woman they just humiliated owned every square inch of the store they stood in. The boutique looked like perfection from the outside. Marble floors, brass light fixtures, and glass shelves lined with perfume bottles too expensive to pronounce. On its window read, "Luxe Boutique, Elegance, Integrity, Legacy." Inside, Amara stood still, wrapped in her gray hoodie in quiet resolve. She didn't blend in. She wasn't supposed to. Her sneakers left faint traces on the polished floor. Not dirt, just presence. To everyone else, she was a stranger wandering in from the street. But this place was hers. Years ago, she'd built it with her own hands, quietly, secretly, using old savings and riskier investments most wouldn't dare touch. But now, no one remembered the girl behind the curtain, and she preferred it that way. Today wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing, watching, measuring. She wasn't here to shop. She was here to test. Not the fabrics, not the display, the people, the culture. What happens when kindness isn't scripted, when titles aren't worn like armor? Could her own legacy stand without her name propping it up, or had it rotted from the inside without her knowing? That was the real reason Amara had walked through those doors, quietly, anonymously, to confront a truth she'd been too proud to admit, that sometimes the things we build forget who built them. 2 weeks earlier, Amara had sat in a boardroom 30 floors above Lexington Avenue, surrounded by people who answered to her, but rarely looked her in the eye. The quarterly numbers were strong, the media coverage flattering. Lux was thriving, or so it seemed, but there was something missing in every glossy report, something no spreadsheet could name. She remembered her father's words, whispered to her the night before he stepped down. "If you really want to lead this place, don't just look at what they build. Look at how they treat the people they think don't matter." At the time, she'd brushed it off. Now she knew better. A legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what happens when you're not in the room. So she removed herself from it. No press release, no entourage, just a silent walk into her own creation, wearing a hoodie and sneakers, stripped of all the things people thought equal power. She didn't warn anyone, not even Marcus, her COO. She just disappeared from the executive floor and started showing up in places no one expected to find a billionaire. Coffee shops, parking garages, customer service lines. And now the boutique, her flagship, her pride, her risk. The plan had been simple. Observe, absorb, disappear. No confrontation, no grand reveal, just a personal audit no one could interfere with. But even the best plans collapse under the weight of human arrogance. She hadn't been in the boutique 5 minutes before the tension clung to her like perfume she didn't ask to wear. No one said welcome. No one asked if she needed help. They watched her, measured her, dismissed her, all because of a hoodie and brown skin. And Amara let them. She didn't flinch when Victoria's voice sliced through the air. She didn't react when Bradley laughed in her face, because she wasn't there to defend herself. She was there to see who needed defending. But the slap, that wasn't part of the plan. Not physical but pointed public. Addressed not from her hand, like a carried disease. That moment rewrote the mission. She could have walked away. She'd done it before. But this time, she felt something deeper. Not rage. Not even hurt. Just clarity. A mirror had been placed in front of her empire. If she didn't like what she saw in its reflection, it was time to stop observing. It was time to hold it accountable. Quietly. Precisely. With the full weight of who she was. As Amara stepped back from the chaos inside the boutique that day, something shifted, not just in the air, but in her. She had seen enough. The mockery, the silence, the cowardice disguised as protocol, and worse, the laughter, not from strangers, but from people whose paychecks bore her invisible signature. She didn't need to announce who she was. The truth had already started unraveling. The girl with the phone, the whisper near the sunglasses rack, the security guard who paused, thinking twice. A system that judges people by appearance is always one breath away from collapsing under its own assumptions. And Amara, she was done being silent. She walked out not with shame, but with purpose. Her camera roll holding receipts, her calendar holding names, and her memory holding every smirk, every insult, every unchecked box from her original quality checklist. This wasn't just a visit anymore. It was an awakening. The boutique thought it had seen the last of her, but what it didn't realize was Amara Johnson had just begun. The boutique hadn't changed. Same polished marble, same curated scent of white rose and amber, same glassy perfection curated to impress. But something had shifted in the air the moment Amara stepped back inside. This time, there were no jazz melodies to soften the room, only the weight of eyes tracking her entrance. The hoodie remained, so did the calm. No entourage, no announcement, just the quiet return of someone who had already seen too much. Bradley noticed her first. His jaw tensed. He nudged Victoria, who turned slowly, like sensing the sting of a memory she didn't want to face. "You again," she sneered, voice higher now, nervous beneath the polish. Amara didn't flinch. She walked past the perfume counter, past the line of handbags she once helped design, and paused in front of a navy gown she hadn't approved. "Just browsing," she said evenly. "Don't flatter yourself," Bradley snapped. "You had your little moment yesterday." Amara turned slightly, her gaze resting on him. Not hostile, not warm, just observing. Victoria crossed her arms tightly. "You're not a customer." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" A beat. The silence rippled. The boutique didn't know it yet, but the reckoning had already begun. Bradley stepped closer, tried to reclaim the confidence he wore like cheap cologne. "Let's not do this again. Do you even have a credit card this time? Or just another fake prop?" The mockery in his voice was louder than the jazz they usually played. Amara didn't answer. She simply reached in her hoodie pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the same matte black card. She held it between two fingers like a quiet challenge. Bradley took it from her hand before she could even extend it fully. He flipped it over, frowned. No logo. No name. Just wait. Something about it made his smirk falter for half a second. "Custom," he muttered. "Cute trick." He slapped it back in her palm without care. "Anyone can order blanks online these days." Victoria laughed. "You really went all in on this fantasy, huh? I mean, it's almost impressive." Amara pocketed the card again, calm as stone. Then she turned and looked around, not at the merchandise, but at the employees. One by one, noting who watched, who looked away, who reached for their phones but didn't record. The atmosphere grew tight, the kind of quiet that comes right before glass shatters. And that glass was already cracking from across the floor. Sasha hovered near the fitting lounge, her fingers trembling around a tray of untouched mimosas. She hadn't spoken, but her eyes, those were loud. She watched as Amara stood firm while the air around her turned electric. Victoria's tone sharpened like glass under pressure. "I don't care what card you flash. You don't belong here. We have standards." Behind her, Another VIP customer poked her head from behind a velvet curtain, sensing the storm brewing. "Is everything all right?" she asked, brows lifted. "Just handling a situation," Victoria chirped, her smile rigid. Bradley leaned in toward Amara. "You're trespassing now. That's real, not pretend." Then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed her elbow. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to claim control. A gasp slipped from someone near the sunglasses rack. "Is he touching her?" someone whispered. Sasha took a step forward, then froze. Amara didn't pull away. She just looked down at Bradley's hand. Then, without raising her voice, she said, "You might want to let go." Her tone wasn't angry. It was final, like the kind of voice that came not from fear, but from knowing you had nothing left to prove. And suddenly, everything in the boutique stopped breathing. Derek, the older security guard, appeared from the back hallway, just in time to see the grip on Amara's arm. His face changed. In 2 strides, he was beside them. His hand landed squarely on Bradley's shoulder. Firm, silent, and enough to make the room blink. "That's enough," he said, voice low, measured but ice cold. Bradley jerked back, confused. "She said she'd leave." Derek didn't move. Victoria stepped forward, heels clacking, voice rising. "She doesn't belong here. This is a private retail space." She didn't resist. Derek said, cutting her off. "You escalated it." Amara finally turned toward the exit, not in retreat, but with poise like someone stepping off stage after delivering the final line. She didn't look back at the people who laughed. The ones who stared were the ones who stayed silent. But just before her hand touched the glass door, she paused. Victoria, flushed and breathing hard, hissed behind her, "Don't ever come back." Amara turned, not to her but to Sasha. Their eyes met once more, quiet, steady, knowing. Amara smiled, a simple curve of the lips. Not victory, not bitterness, just truth. And with that, she stepped outside alone. But this time the entire city was already watching. 12 blocks away, in a dim-lit coffee shop with cracked tile floors and a buzz of lo-fi jazz, 2 college students huddled over a laptop. The clip had just hit their feed, vertical, shaky, the kind of video that gets ignored, unless something feels off. And this one did. A woman in a gray hoodie, silent, still, while a boutique manager screamed at her. No punches, no curses, just humiliation served like champagne. Public, effortless, and cold. Alyssa hit pause. Something's weird about her. Jade, sipping oat milk from a chipped ceramic mug, leaned closer. "We're how?" Alyssa rewound, squinted. "That card. Look at her hand." The matte black glint caught the light. No logo, no name, just clean power. "That's not a fake," Alyssa whispered. "That's custom." Jade frowned, scrolling on her phone. Wait. She stopped on an old tech magazine post. A photo from the awards gala. A woman half-turned from the camera, black tailored suit, hair pulled back, and on her wrist, barely visible, a minimalist tattoo, a geometric J inside a circle. Jade's mouth dropped. "That's her. That's Amara Johnson." Alyssa blinked. "Wait, the AI investor, the one who funds women-owned tech startups." Jade whispered like the truth might burn the room down. "The billionaire one." The video had already surpassed 400,000 views. By the time Jade hit refresh, it was pushing past 700,000. Comments multiplied by the second. "Is this real? She should sue. That store's dead." Then came to reposts. An influencer with 2 million followers stitched the video with a reaction. Wide eyes, hand over mouth, captioned, "Y'all, this woman owns the store." Another tweet blew up. "I used to work there. That manager, always been like that." Screenshots flew across platforms. Threads unraveled histories. Someone found the boutique's Yelp reviews, riddled with quiet warnings. Words like cold, judgy, only nice if you look rich. And buried among them, they made me feel like I didn't belong. Now those voices rose from the shadows, lit by algorithms and rage. But the loudest silence came from the boutique itself. No statement, no denial, just a locked account and comment sections turned off. Back in the coffee shop, Jade leaned back in her chair. They kicked out the owner. Alyssa stared at the pause video. Amara's face mid-glance, serene, unreadable. And they don't even know it yet, Jade whispered, but she does. Outside the cafe window, a light breeze rattled a flyer loose. It fluttered down the street like a warning. The world had just washed a reckoning, and it was only beginning. At the 23rd floor of Johnson Holdings Tower, tension clung to the walls like static. A dozen department heads sat frozen around a glass conference table, all staring at the paused video on a mounted screen. Amara in her hoodie, Victoria mid-sneer, Bradley gripping her arm. No narration, no context, just truth in high definition. David Lynn, head of corporate risk, finally cleared his throat. This was filmed inside one of our flagship stores. Claire Monroe, HR director, paled. How long ago? 2 hours, David answered, and it's already trending at number 4 nationally. Another exec asked, has she made any statement? David shook his head. Not even internally. Claire swallowed hard. You think she planned this? Silence. Then David said, I don't think she had to. She just walked in. At that moment, the door opened. In stepped Marcus Chun, CEO. No tie, just presence. The room stood automatically. He waved him down. Where is she? David answered quietly. Not here. Not yet. Marcus turned to the screen, stared at Amara's still frame, then to Claire. Last audit from that store. Claire scrambled through her tablet. 6 weeks ago. Red flags on staff behavior. Profiling complaints. Marcus didn't blink, and we left her there. Not a question, a judgment. Marcus turned back to the screen, eyes sharp, unreadable. Victoria Whitmore, Bradley Morrison, he said aloud, tasting their names. Well-connected, Claire added weakly. Married to a lawyer, old friends with the Lux founding family. Marcus's jaw flexed. Connections don't erase behavior. He looked to David. I want a full audit. Transaction logs, staff schedules, exit interviews, client complaints. Everything. Tonight. David nodded. Should we release a statement? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. Let the truth breathe a little longer. He picked up his tablet, scanned it once, then said quietly, I'm going down there. Claire blinked. To the boutique. Marcus was already moving. To clean the front window. It wasn't a metaphor. Not to him. Downstairs, even a security guard of the lobby had paused scrolling long enough to realize the woman trending across every news feed had just walked past him that morning. No hoodie now. No disguise. Just Amara Johnson in her own skin. Black suit crisp. Eyes forward. She didn't need an entourage. Her silence was enough to hush an entire office. As she stepped into the elevator, someone whispered, she's really her. But Amara didn't react. She already knew. The boutique glittered like nothing had ever happened. Music returned to its mellow pulse. Champagne flutes refilled, and the staff moved like dancers rehearsing a lie. Victoria adjusted a clutch display, tried to silence the memories still echoing beneath her skin. Bradley scrolled through his phone, pausing only when a video counter ticked past 3 million. People are dramatic, Victoria muttered, swirling the last of her rose. She came in wearing sneakers. Yeah, Bradley replied flatly. And now we're famous. She rolled her eyes. It'll die in 2 days. But the boutique doors opened before she could finish the thought. Not a customer, not an influencer, not someone who needed help finding a size. He didn't wear a name tag, but he didn't need to. Marcus Chin walked in like silence followed him. No fanfare, just presence. Navy suit sharp, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. The staff stilled, uncertain. Victoria, masking fear with cheer, stepped forward. Welcome to Lux Boutique. Can I help you find something special tonight? Her voice climbed too high. Marcus stopped exactly 5 feet from her, opened a portfolio, laid out 3 printed screenshots. Her sneer, Bradley's grip, Amara's face. Victoria's smile fractured. I don't know what this is about. But Marcus raised a single finger, and silence obeyed. I'm Marcus Chun, he said, voice low but solid. Chief Executive Officer, Johnson Holdings. The words didn't echo, they detonated. Bradley froze. One of the assistants gasped audibly. Victoria's lips parted, but no sound came. Marcus didn't flinch. He turned another page in the folder. Internal reports confirm this location has received over 20 formal complaints in the last quarter alone. Profiling, staff regression, deliberate neglect. His gaze shifted, steel wrapped in velvet. Would either of you like to explain that to me? Victoria stumbled. I wasn't aware of those numbers. Marcus tilted his head slightly. You weren't aware, or you didn't care. She stiffened. We have a standard to uphold. Your only standard, Marcus replied, should be respect. He placed a tablet on the counter and pressed play. The same viral video now lit up the boutique's own display monitor. No sound, just visuals. Every moment unblinking. Victoria's curled sneer. Bradley's mocking laugh. Sasha, in the background, frozen between fear and instinct. And Amara, at the center, still silent, dignified. Marcus paused the clip. Do you recognize this woman? Bradley finally found his voice. She's the one from the video. The one who caused all this. Marcus leaned in, voice now colder. She's your boss. Victoria blinked. What? She's Amara Johnson. Marcus said. She owns this place. Victoria staggered back. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, but no one moved. Bradley's knees buckled slightly. There's no way that woman looked like what exactly? Marcus interrupted. Eyes locked. Bradley's mouth hung open, words lost in his throat. Victoria's voice cracked. This is a setup. She came in dressed like someone off the street. She didn't say who she was. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. She didn't have to. He laid out 2 more documents. Complaint transcripts filed long before the video went viral. Customers ignored. Judged by appearance. Spoke down to. Repeated patterns. Same behaviors. Different faces. Victoria tried to gather herself. She didn't act like a CEO. You mean, Marcus said, she didn't act the way you think power should look. His tone was quieter now. More dangerous. You believed respect was conditional, that it came from heels and lipstick and brand names. He glanced to Sasha, still standing silently near the lounge. You knew better, didn't you? Sasha swallowed, but nodded faintly. She didn't look angry, she said. She looked disappointed. Marcus turned back to Victoria. And now, you finally get to feel what that looks like. The boutique didn't feel expensive anymore. It felt exposed. Then the door opened again. No warning. No entourage. Just Amara. This time, not in a hoodie, not hidden. She wore a black sheath dress. Understated and flawless, her hair loose over her shoulders. No makeup, no armor, just presence and silence. Everyone turned. The room stiffened like a courtroom, waiting for verdict. She walked in slowly, steps soft, deliberate. Marcus nodded once. Right on time. Bradley took a full step back. I didn't know, he stammered. Amara met his eyes. I didn't ask if he did. Her voice was calm, measured, rain before thunder. She turned to Victoria, whose posture had collapsed beneath all the bravado. Miss Johnson, don't, Amara said, quiet but firm. Victoria's lips snapped shut. Amara stepped to the center of the room, not to confront, but to speak to the space itself. I built Lux because I believed elegance shouldn't come at the cost of dignity, she said, voice unwavering. Because women like me were never meant to feel welcome in places like this. So I made one. Her eyes scanned the faces, some ashamed, some unreadable. And here we are, years later, still being treated like shadows. No one dare interrupt, because they weren't just witnessing a reveal. They were standing in the consequence of it. Amara turned to Marcus. I want a full audit. He didn't hesitate. It's already underway. She gave a single nod, then turned to Sasha. "You okay?" The young woman's voice barely made it past her lips. "Yes, thank you." Amara looked at her for a moment, then back to the others. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "But if I have to walk into every store with my name on it to see what our customers are enduring, I will." She moved toward the exit, but before stepping through the door, she added without looking back, "And don't bother calling HR. They're already waiting upstairs." She left without slamming doors or shouting demands. The silence she left behind was louder than any outburst. Marcus turned to the staff. "Effective immediately, this location is closed. Internal review begins tonight." Victoria spun. "You can't do that." "I just did," he replied. Bradley muttered something about clients. Marcus didn't blink. Clients deserve better. As he reached the door, he turned once more. "Remember this moment, not because you got caught, but because for once, someone watched you treat a stranger, and realize she was never a stranger to begin with." Then he left, and with him, the last illusion shattered. By Monday morning, the Luxe Boutique on Lexington Avenue looked nothing like it did just days earlier. Gone were the polished smiles and curated illusions. In their place, silence, clipboards, and a dozen quiet professionals with sharp eyes and colder questions. The sign taped to the front glass read, "Temporarily closed for internal review." Inside, every corner of the boutique was under scrutiny. Shelves measured, cameras rewound, customer service logs dissected. Even posture and proximity were noted. What had once been retail theater was now evidence. Bradley sat slumped at a table in the break room, his suit wrinkled, time missing, hands clasped. Across from him, Victoria stared blankly, makeup faded, jaw tight. A woman from HR entered, quiet but precise, and laid 2 sealed folders on the table. "Please review the documents. Termination packets, pending board confirmation." Victoria flinched. "Wait, you're firing us." The woman didn't blink. "I'm just delivering what the evidence already decided." Bradley reached for his packet slowly, like it might explode. In another corner of the store, Sasha walked beside 2 members from the inclusion board, recounting everything. Honestly, calmly. No revenge in her voice. Only one truth. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. That line hung in the air like smoke. Heavy, lingering, true. Near the front display, Amara stood in silence. She wasn't watching. She wasn't managing. She was remembering. Her fingers grazed the emerald silk of the same dress that had once been slapped from her hands. Now hung untouched, oddly still beneath the boutique lights. "I remember when you picked that design," Marcus said softly, stepping beside her. "Still your favorite?" Amara didn't answer right away. "I used to think it represented achievement. Now I think it reminds me who I did this for." She looked out across the store, not at the inventory, but the culture it had once silently harbored. It looked good, but it didn't feel right, and I missed it because I trusted the surface. Marcus nodded. "The surface was polished." "Exactly," Amara replied. "Too polished." In the distance, Victoria's muffled voice raised again. Some desperate argument in a side room, but neither of them turned. Amara finally asked, "What's the press saying?" Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling briefly. "They're calling you the quiet storm. Others think it was a sting operation." She almost smiled. "Wasn't supposed to be. But it worked," he said. She turned to him, voice low. "No, it didn't. Not if this is what it took to see what we've allowed." That silence said more than headlines ever could. The boutique had reopened quietly. No press, no announcement, just new staff, fresh light, and one sign behind a counter that read, "LUX isn't a look, it's a way of being." And yet, on the 3rd day, Victoria came back. Not in heels, not in red lipstick. Her blouse was wrinkled, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She stood near the edge of the store, not demanding attention, only hoping not to be turned away. Amara noticed her, but said nothing at first. Victoria approached slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd be here, and yet here you are," Amara replied. Her tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't forgiving either. It was real. Victoria lowered her eyes. I watched the video. I've read every complaint. I can't explain any of it. Amara waited. I resigned. Yesterday. I didn't want it to be your decision. I needed it to be mine. Amara nodded slightly. That's something. Victoria hesitated. You didn't stop me that day, even when I humiliated you. Amara met her gaze, calm and centered. If I had, you wouldn't have heard yourself. And with that, she stepped away, not to escape, but to continue. Some lessons don't need a response, only a mirror. In the stockroom, Bradley packed his things in silence. A Bluetooth speaker, a branded bottle, a framed staff photo cracked to the corner. He sat for a long moment, staring at it, like he finally saw the man in it for the first time. Across the room, Sasha appeared in the doorway. He looked up, unsure. She didn't move. Are you going to apologize? She asked softly. Bradley exhaled. Would it matter? No, she replied. But it tells me you're not leaving as the same man who walked in. He nodded slowly. I laughed because Victoria laughed. I followed without asking, and I never once wondered who they were. That's the apology, Sasha said. It doesn't erase it. No, she agreed, but it makes you human. He stood, holding the box to his chest like something fragile. Tell people I left with nothing. Sasha tilted her head. Not nothing. You left with the truth. And for once, he didn't argue. He just walked out. No cameras. No headline. Just footsteps fading into the street. Outside, the air felt different. He didn't know if the city had changed, or if finally he had. But for the first time, he saw the people around him. And this time, he didn't look away. The boutique was quiet now. Not empty, but calm. Warm light replaced harsh reflections. The scent of ego had faded, replaced by rosewood and truth. Sasha adjusted a scarf on a mannequin near the front. Deliberate, gentle, no longer rushed. Across the room, a teenage boy picked out a birthday gift with help from a new associate. A customer in a wheelchair was offered warm tea without being asked twice. At the heart of it all stood Amara, not giving orders, not observing, just present. She wore a soft cream sweater, wide-legged trousers, hair tucked behind one ear. No badge, no press, just her. On the wall behind her, the emerald dress had been replaced. In its place, a black and white photograph of Amara at 27, unpacking boxes during the boutique's first week of launch. The caption beneath read, "Style begins with how you treat people." A customer paused, looked at the photo, then looked at Amara. There was recognition, but not awe. Respect. She nodded, smiled. Amara smiled back. No words were needed. Outside, the street hummed with life. A woman held the door open for Amara as she stepped out. "Thank you," Amara said, soft and sincere. "You're welcome," the woman replied. And that was it. No fanfare, just two women who saw each other. Amara walked slowly, past the same cafe where her reflection once looked back in defeat, past the bench where a girl once whispered that was wrong, past the exact spot where security had been summoned, not for a crime, but for her presence. Each step marked a memory, not of victimhood, but of proof. She didn't need to speak now. She had already said what mattered by saying nothing at all. On the other side of the street, someone pointed. "That's her," they whispered. "She owns the store." Amara didn't react. She wasn't here for attention. She was here because this was hers too. The street, the moment, the air. The system had finally caught up to the woman it tried to erase, and she didn't need a shout to take her space. A flyer from a nearby bulletin board floated in the wind, landing softly at her feet. She picked it up. It read, "Now hiring. All backgrounds welcome. Bring yourself. We'll bring the rest." She smiled faintly and folded it, not because she needed the job, but because it reminded her why she built Lux in the first place. Not to sell clothing, but to offer presence to those who were taught they didn't deserve to belong. Now they did. 3 days later, a young woman stood outside the boutique, face pressed gently against the glass. She wore a second-hand coat, backpack slung loose, hesitation in her stance. Amara had seen that look before. In her own reflection, years ago, she opened the door and stepped aside. The girl startled. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You just wanted to see what was inside," Amara said softly. The girl nodded. It always looked too perfect. Amara smiled gently. Not anymore. She motioned her in. The girl stepped into the boutique, as if crossing into someplace sacred. But this time, there were no thresholds of shame, no stairs, just welcome. As the girl wandered toward the display wall, Amara turned back toward the entrance. She didn't need to supervise. Her work was already speaking. Inside, a new associate offered the girl tea. Sasha smiled from the counter. A boy helped the customer find earrings without asking her what she could afford. And the music played. Not loud, not fake, just right. Amara watched from outside. Not because she didn't belong, but because sometimes leadership means knowing when to let go. This wasn't just her store anymore. It was finally becoming what she had always meant it to be, for everyone. As Amara walked away from the boutique for the last time, the autumn wind lifted the collar of her coat. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Behind her, the windows reflected a new version of luxe. Less about shimmer, more about substance. A teenage boy held the door for a woman in scrubs. A customer in a hijab smiled at her own reflection while browsing. A mother with 2 children laughed softly as they picked matching scarves. Change didn't roar. It arrived like this, quiet, permanent, undeniable. And Amara, she simply walked, past the place where her silence once made others uncomfortable, past the bench where someone once apologized for not speaking up, past the moment where a dress fell to the floor like a verdict. None of that defined her. What defined her was that she stayed standing, that she never had to prove herself by shouting, but by returning, again and again, until no one could ignore what she represented. She reached the corner, paused at the crosswalk. Someone nearby looked up from their phone and whispered, "That's her." And this time, there was no scandal in their voice, only awe, only knowing, because she didn't just own the store. She redefined what ownership meant.